Hello, this is the Blast Report podcast on all things blasting. My name is Evan Thibaud with New Wave Consulting, and I want to thank all the drill and blast teams along with those supporting them who are out there on the pattern. The production team at Blast Think and I would like to welcome you to today's episode of the Blast Report podcast. This episode is brought to you by Enrich Bits and Tools, where we bring reliability back in business. Drill bits, loader teeth, roof bolt drivers, and other wear parts outperform and exceed your expectations. Find out more at enrichbits.com. All right, thank you for coming on the podcast. I have Teele Tuuna-Lootus here, and we have a nice little episode. We're going to do a Mother's Day episode because she is a explosives engineer and a blaster in her own right, but she's also the daughter of a very well-known person in the explosives industry, Viive Tuuna. And so welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And, we would like to make sure that we have listeners in all different areas and groups. And you're calling in from Estonia, right?
Yes, that's true.
And so I've asked you on here as kind of a Mother's Day episode because we've done a Father's Day episode in the past, and we have a very large group of people in this industry who are in a family-owned business. And a lot of our guests are in family-owned businesses. And their father, their grandfather, and in some cases with Paul Sturck, he's the 20th generation miner in his family, and his son was even a guest on the show. But we haven't really had the opportunity to have a mother-daughter pair, which is quite unique and interesting. And I'd like to kind of dive into that and see the similarities of what it was like growing up with someone who was in the industry on your side, and if there was some unique experiences that you had growing up. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a little background on who you are and how you got to start in the industry.
Oh, well, with us, it has always been a little bit the matter of coincidences. My mother has always had a very good eye for taking advantage of good situations. She started as a translator in this industry. She speaks fluent Swedish, and a Swedish company wanted to do blasting works in Estonia as a first foreign company in Estonia. And they did great. And she started out as a manager in that company from the very first beginning in 1997 when the activities started to be carried out. And of course, I was quite small back then and didn't understand much, but for me, it was no surprise. She's fearless. And now she has been running that company about 29 years, 28. Wow. And it has been very interesting, amazing, an adventure, but also, of course, it's part of our lives now. It's not just a work thing. It affects the whole family in a good way, I think.
And so it was the very first foreign company in Estonia?
Yes, with foreigner owners in blasting in this industry. And they took part in a tender. They were successful. And the company started off with very great start. It was with Swedish people, some of the Swedish blasters who started to train Estonians, and it worked out well. Got lots of problems solved out with their know-how and our own special know-how because of our very specific geology in Estonia. And it has been.
What was it? What was one of the first earlier stories that you heard from your mother of why she decided that just going from being a translator to a manager role, or what was the main drive that she decided that this was kind of her path that she wanted to go taking for years in the future?
As long as I know, for her, it was very interesting since the beginning. She has always taken interest in various things. She took part in foreign studies in Sweden, and she had the courage to go outside of Estonia when Estonia first became independent, and it was quite difficult life here. She needed to study more about the mining and explosives. So she's now the organizing of handling of explosives. So according to Estonian regulations, there are different levels, and basically she is the one who is responsible for the whole activity of the company. And she just took it on since the beginning. And she became the manager because she was so well with handling all the bureaucracy and not just translating, but also going through the licenses and problem solving, people's management, everything. And when she translated plastings, she actually learned about them, because you go through everything, you speak every little detail that is given to you. And as she took great interest in it, she learned a lot and decided to stay on. And of course, she was asked to stay on. And just years went by, and she has been also the sole owner of the company at some point. So she's just fearless.
With that as part of her background, I understand what you mean by you have to learn the subject as a translator, because there are so many terms and euphemisms and every little detail that you can't just translate one word for another. I mean, we can't even do that between the states that we have here in the United States. So I could only imagine what it would be like operating in different areas of Europe. And so is there like a moment that your mother has? I mean, she's still here. We could have her on as an interview and as a guest for an interview, but it's also nice to kind of have you as the daughter kind of share the story, maybe a little gift as a Mother's Day here. Is there a moment that you've heard from her that's kind of one of those sealed the deal moments of when she knew that this was the career choice that she wanted? Was it like her first blast, or was there anything that do you remember sitting at the table when you were young and hearing your mom talk about at dinner, and you seeing like the passion in her eyes?
It was when she realized that managing all the licenses and all going through all the Estonian regulations and getting the things running for the Swedish who wanted to do blasting works in Estonia, I think it was a challenge. I think she works well with all kinds of challenges. It gives her more energy, and she loves to solve puzzles. And the area of expertise was so different from previous, what she had even imagined her life would bring. And I don't think that she ever had a doubt about being part of this. Even if at first she started just as a sole translator, she became part of the group of people who worked towards blasting in Estonia very quickly. And she gained the trust, and she managed to go through with all those challenges very easily. And I think it's part of the reason there is that it was such an interesting subject. And I think it became interesting when she started to translate it, to give explanations to local administratives and people who were connected to the works in the quarry and who started to tender. And I think she also saw a possibility to do some good, because at that time, this company was the only company who didn't buy explosives from Russia. And that made the deal happen, actually. And I think
wow.
that also was one of the big issues at that time. We were very patriotic. Estonians have always been very patriotic and carried their own identity. And I think she was very proud to be part of that, because geology blasting is very, very important for the whole industry. Everything starts with it. Everything starts. You can't build a road. You can't have cement. You can't do basically anything. We don't have metals here in Estonia, but our limestone is very good to use on different areas of building materials and building roads. So it was an important thing to get going.
Okay, and it's a very good point. I mean, if you don't have metals, you definitely have to focus in on different types of blasting. And we all know limestone can be hero rock, or it can be a nightmare if it's in
Yes.
extremely lots of caverns and caves and
Everything, a lot.
It's and you never know which way it's
nowadays,
gonna dip.
That's true. Nowadays, we do have metals. We have a lot of rare earth metals. Estonia is one of the exporters next to China and US. No other countries at the moment. So we have developed a lot since the beginning of our second independence. So, and I think she's proud to be part of this also. Yeah.
Yeah, should be, absolutely. And so what was it that made you get into it? I know you've told me you enjoy sailing and some other aspects of life and things like that, but were you sitting at the dinner table one day and saying, I want to do just like this job, just like my mom, or I would do it differently if I had the opportunity, or get me out of here. I want to do something totally different. I don't want to have anything to do with blasting. Or what was the kind of the reason that you wanted to follow in the footsteps, let's say?
Well, my mom has always been a great inspiration to me. She has always been my hero, and she has always supported any idea that I have had. And I actually was very connected with arts, and I studied art, and I didn't consider much about the industry, but I had the possibility to go with her to her workplaces, and I always enjoyed quarry life, actually, to be honest. Might sound weird. I have always been part of nature, growing up in countrysides also, and when I went to the quarry with my mom, it was this industrial landscape and connection to the stone. I didn't see much destruction, but at the same time, I also liked the issue of humans working together with nature, and sometimes doing it in a bad way and sometimes doing it in a good way. And I loved photography. I still do. And I took lots of industrial landscape photographies at that time. And she always tried to provide all the possibilities for me, and I have always been very grateful for that. And being there with her and looking at her managing this with a bunch of guys who were drillers and blasters and doing all the hard work, and she had to take all the responsibility, because quite from the beginning she was not only a manager but responsible for the handling of explosives, because the regulation needed an Estonian to be that person, and she did it with 5 months to go through the training, and it was amazing. And I always enjoyed being there with her. And I think at that moment I never considered working as a blaster. I had my arts, and then I became a florist, and still doing art on the side until she started to communicate with the European Federation of Explosive Engineers. And as Estonia is rarely, actually quite young country, we don't have much of shot fire education. We are very active in that area, but we don't have quite a lot of materials we didn't have previously. And there was a possibility to take part in a project. And I actually started to write this project, and it was her idea. So I had just finished university. I started studying in Estonia, and I finished in Innsbruck, Austria. And I had learned about writing projects for the European Commission. And she had the idea to include me into this project. And that was the beginning also for my road to the explosives industry. And now I have also my company, which helped her company.
She tricked you.
So, in a way,
she got you in there.
Yeah. yes, it was a very good trick. Smooth.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
you currently are the owner of some quarries, so you liked the quarry life enough that you decided that you wanted to continue that, right?
I've always been interested in different technologies, and Estonia, thanks to their geology, has many possibilities to use that stone. And there's also a dimensional stone industry here, which has been quite big. But at some point, many quarries ended up all their stone, and they were closed down. And the companies who managed those quarries, they started to import stone. But I really, really love Estonian limestone. It's one of the oldest in Europe. It dates back to basically to the beginning in Cambrium and Ordovicium in 560 million years ago, way before dinosaurs. And it has amazing patterns, amazing fossils, and amazing history. And you can always discover something new. But my idea at first was to start breaking the stone with specific pipe charges, and to develop this technology to be used in Estonia. It wasn't never used in Estonia before. And it happened so that we had bad time in the company. It was during the recession in 2007, 2008. And I was already working in my mother's company. And I wanted to help her out with the financials and everything. And she said, if you find new clients, she said that to every worker, that if you find a new client, you will get a big bonus, so to say. And then I delved into all the industry in Estonia. I looked up all the quarries. I went through searching for information, and I discovered that some of the quarries didn't use explosives at all. And I visited those quarries, and I learned that taking this old rock, which has been situated in the land for millions of years, with machinery, it's quite expensive, and it's of course hard. The machine parts break down all the time, and they need to repair it, and it's not actually very sufficient by creating CO2 and all this waste and oil and everything. So I decided that we need to find a solution to that with explosives. I actually think that explosives are part of our development as a humankind. So it's not only just Stone Age or Iron Age. I think there's an explosives age. So I started to develop this technology, and I found out that there remaining of 9 quarries were only 3 active quarries. So I started to provide this as a service to break the rock with pipe charges after I had tested the technology for a couple of years under my own company, because it was so different from the regular drilling and blasting that we created a different kind of company for that. And I had all the licenses done for myself with the help of my mom. And she really believed in this, but she was one of the very few people who believed in this, because blasting is all about the amounts that you can do. And in Estonian dimensional quarries, in very, very, very small amounts compared to, other parts of the world. Basically, some quarries live of only 1,000 cubic meters in 1 year. And how can you earn money from blasting this small amounts? But I told her it's not about the amounts, it's about the quality you get. And of course, with special technology, you need to have a special price. But as there were only 3 factories in Estonia at that time, there wasn't a big point to sell this as a service. So I decided to become their competitor. And I now have 2 quarries in the factory also. But I'm totally in blasting works. I can't get away from it. And I'm now focusing more on special blasting rather than big quarry blasting, even though I still need to do those 2. So yeah.
That tends to be the problem with most blasters, huh? They can't get away. They can't get. There's
That's
too many
true.
blasts, and there's not enough of you guys, and you got to go all over the place. It was just yesterday you said you were driving 600 kilometers to do a blast, right?
Yes, in Lithuania.
That's far away. In Europe, that's a big distance,
Yeah,
in the United States,
3 countries.
We don't care. Yeah, that's 3 countries. Absolutely. And so when you got into the blasting industry, instead of deciding to, continue a career in photography and being a florist, and was there a specific moment that, okay, so you managed to get these projects, your mom pulled you in and you were writing these projects, you were already kind of intrigued by the blasting world and the quarry industry, and was there a defining moment for you when you decided, okay, I wasn't just going to do this for the money, but it was more, let's continue blasting, and instead of just project management, you decided to go to the shot fire side where there's so much more liability and there's so much more stress? Is there, a certain moment that kind of pulls you to that? Because there's all different ways to go in this explosives industry, and being a shot fire in Europe, I assume is a pretty unique application, right?
Yes, it's also quite unique in Estonia. This is a very small country. There's only 1.3 million people. And at the moment, I'm still the only female shot fire in Estonia, which is a sad thing. But I had a very
You'll
specific
change that
moment.
Don't worry. That'll change.
Yeah, I hope. My first realization was, I had access to the great best material shot fires could have in Europe. And when I went on with this project, I started to feel that I really need to know more about blasting works in order to be able to work well with that education project, because who am I to talk about shot fires education if I don't know anything about blasting works? And at some point, I told that to my mom. I told her I want to be a shot fire. And she was at first, she was of course supportive, but she didn't really put this as a great idea. And of course, she had her own worries that it's not an easy job, or maybe I find something else to do in life with the project and the management. But I had at that time also become the work environment specialist in her company. It's mandatory. So someone needed to do this. And it was also interesting because it involved a lot of knowledge about explosives. In Estonia, it's quite harsh when it comes to regulations. And it's very, very, very hard with environmental regulations. So you need to be really careful and you really need to know what you're doing. Of course, that's everywhere the same, but sometimes they go over the board with bureaucracy, so you need to really handle it. And the first blast for me, after I had said to her that I want to be a shot fire, there was a situation where our team at that time was very short of hands for one blast. It was in November, and November in Estonia is not a very friendly weather. We had 30 holes. It was not a very high bench in Estonia. There's quite small quarries when compared to other countries. There were 2 guys and me. My mom had this idea that, maybe you can go and help them. So I dressed up in someone else's high-vis clothing, and I went there, and it was snowing and raining at the same time. It was a very hard wind, somewhat like a blizzard, but wet. And I was the one who needed to pump the water out of the drill holes. I remember it was very, very hard at one point, because when the hose got full of water, it was heavy for my hands. But I never minded with physical work since I was a very little girl. Growing up in countryside demanded physical work, and I actually love physical work. And when we finished that blast, you make the preparations, and then it's just 3 seconds up and everything's done. I was amazed. I loved it. That was the day that I told to myself that I can be a shot fire. And at that time, you needed to learn much longer than now. I needed to be someone who just carries the boxes for a year. So a practitioner or a fellow. And then I needed to take some trainings and make an exam. And of course, somewhat the issue of me being a woman on the exam was, it was welcomed. But of course, you need to prove yourself. But I had such an interest for this job, so it wasn't really hard for me. And since then, I have just kept on learning, and it's now 10 years for me.
Wow. And so, congratulations on that being, being the female shot firer in Estonia. That's pretty, when you say it like that, it's pretty impressive. There's quite a few women in our industry, and people have been around for a while, and it seems to be less and less of a of a rarity. But putting it, being the only one in the country, that definitely brings a note. Now, would you say for, obviously most of our demographic is just like this industry, or the listeners of this podcast is men, and we don't tend to think about it too much. Is there something you'd like to say to maybe some of the younger women who are coming into this industry, who might be listening to this podcast, as an advice, or as a tip or a hint, or something that you've enjoyed being a woman in the industry? Is there something you can add to that, so we can kind of mention that?
Yeah, for me, it has never felt lonely being a woman in this industry. And I think that I am not only one because of my mom. She's not a shot fire, but I still feel that I am following her on her footsteps. So she has always been ahead of me, and I'm really, really happy to be able to help her out in her company and make things work, and always find a way to make the blasts work better, and take care of the problems in the quarries. And for all the other women who might consider this job, well, I totally welcome it, because I remember one time when a physiotherapist I was seeing at for some problems with my back told me about this job. At first, when I met him, he said, "How can you be a shot fire? How is this even happening? You're such a small woman and doing this kind of job." Of course, he didn't even know that this job exists. Most people don't know who's a shot fire. But I told him that I think it's interesting, and I find great pleasure in doing this job. Every day is different. Every day can be a challenge, and I'm really, really satisfied when I can manage this challenge, and I come out of it with the great reward of a good blast. And the second time I met him, he told me, I now understand how you are doing this job. And he said that it must be something with this brain works when you go for blast work, because you need two parts of the brain to work properly at the same time. You need to be able to calculate and see things in a logical, mathematical, and physical way. But at the same time, you need to be able to imagine the outcome. You need to be able to have enough of creativity in your brain, so that you know when you put the energetic material in such a way and you imagine the outcome, and then when you are correct about it, things work out. So that's why I think that being a woman is not a problem at all. It might even be useful to have this intuition and creativity when it comes to blasting works. Of course, men have that too, but it's just different with women.
And never had any.
And I've never had any problems. I've never had any issues with my team members about me being a woman. There's no difference, at least in Estonia and Lithuania. I'm also a shot firer in Lithuania, so I don't really see that there's any anything that can stop you. The only thing that's hard, the only thing is basically is that sometimes you don't really have a good possibility for toilet to go to the toilet, because most quarries are for men and everything's for men. And also at some point there was not enough high visibility clothing for women in this industry. At least it was that way 10 years ago in Estonia. And so I took some clothes of men and I had them remade, and so that they would suit me well, and no problems. So you just find a way.
Absolutely. I know that there is a company out there now specifically making women's high vis, and they might even use this episode in their marketing for sure. But it's and that's wonderful to hear, and that's a good note for some of our listeners. We always want to hear some advice to our fellow members, whether you're older or younger. There's always something that you can learn from someone in another region or under another level of whether it's a different type of rock or their different gender or whatever. There's always something different about everyone and how they operate. So another question on the subject of being different here. I think most of us don't know too much about Estonia, and you've given us a nice little hint into the fact that the patriotism and finding explosives that didn't come from Russia, and that there's not a lot of metals, and it's limestone and karst topography, and you have dimension stone as well. I haven't had a guest on the show where we've got to talk about dimension stone, and I've done a little bit of dimension stone work in the past. I wouldn't say I'm an expert by any means, but would you go into kind of a little bit of what you can share on how you blast dimension stone and how it's unique from other types of blasting limestone? I mean, obviously fragmentation is not your friend. And are you blasting like the surface overburden, and are you doing very fine pre-splitting in order to maintain the dimension itself and to make a fracture line, or are you just removing the overburden to then allow the mechanical saws to cut to the actual finish? Or can you dive into that for us, please?
Yes, it has been such an interesting journey with dimensional stone. One thing that is common with, I would say, regular quarry blasting is that it all starts with drilling. Everything is totally different. When I first started to research about possibilities for dimension stone blasting, then I visited Finland and Portugal. Portugal uses lots of black powder, and Finland didn't use any black powder. They had pipe charges, and I realized that this could work also in Estonia, because when it comes to black powder in limestone, it's not efficient, because we have lots of natural cracks, and limestone is layered. So the gases of black powder, they escape and they don't work efficiently with breaking the rock. But pipe charges, which I found out to be used in Finland, are built a little differently. So I started testing this technology in Estonian limestone. And when in Finland they blasted granite with the pipe charges, they needed to use line drilling on the sides of the bench. And they used the wire sawing on the sides of the bench, and then line drilling on the back of the bench. And into the drill holes, they put up the pipe charges. The drill holes have 32 millimeters diameter only, but the pipe charges are 17 millimeters. And now what they use is air cushion in order to leave the rock without the micro cracks. But to make the blast work properly, you need to blast all the holes at the same time. But in Estonia, our limestone is about 2.6, 2.7 of thickness, and we don't need to actually open up the sides or the horizontal layers. In Finland, they drilled vertical and horizontal holes for the bench. But in Estonia, we used the ending of a certain layer, and we didn't need to use the horizontal holes. So I started to test it, and I found out that it works quite well. We don't use stemming. It's all about air cushion, and the pipe charges have about 1,000.22 of detonation velocity up to 2,000 meters per second of detonation velocity. So
it's a very low
yes.
defil graded product. Wow,
yes.
Okay. And it's not shot at the exact same time like in Finland?
No, it's shot at exactly the same time. And
okay.
For that, we use detonating cord. But you need to take care with detonating cord in order to keep the air cushion. So when the hole diameter is 32 millimeters and the pipe charge is 17, you still have space for the detonating cord, because in order to have all the pipe charges which can be put on top of each other, as they are 60 centimeters long, and you can fill up as deep borehole as you wish. In Finland, they have 9 meters. In Estonia, we use 2 to 4 meters. We have very small benches. And with detonating cord, you just need to take care that it doesn't really touch the stone surface inside the drill hole. And you wouldn't be recommended to have any water in the drill holes. And it was amazing journey when testing lead to the real outcome. Because with limestone, we expanded the distance between the holes. In Finland, they use 20 centimeters between the drill holes, so it's very, very tight. In Estonia, we could use 30 to 60 centimeters, depending on the area.
And there's no micro fractures inside of the dimension stone. Wow, that's great.
We did a lot of testing for the stone also before we decided that the technology still works. We started with our own testing, and we finished up with the testings in laboratory. So the first thing as you know, limestone is quite porous. So you would pick up a rock in a quarry where you haven't blasted, and then you pick up a rock which you blasted. You put both of these rocks in a bucket full of water, for example, and then you keep it there for a week. And after that, you weigh the rock. You have to weigh the rock before and then after a week in being in the water. And if there is quite big difference between those two rocks, you see that one of them might have become more porous and takes water in. And it didn't happen for us. We did it several times when blasting with pipe charges, and it worked well. And the laboratory just confirmed that. So it's a very good technology, because it's also very energy efficient, and in that way it's good for the nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to have a massive saw running constantly. And then you also are saying that you don't even have to do the horizontal drilling because you drill perfectly to a certain bedding plane, right?
Exactly, yes. And if you use detonating cord, you have a big air blast. So in order to keep our neighbors of the quarry satisfied and happy also, and take the air blast down, we covered the blasting area with geotextiles, and onto the geotextile we put dry sand, and it worked well. The air blast came down, and there was not a lot of noise to disturb the neighbors and the animals around. And I'm really happy with the outcome. But of course, it took about 4 years to develop everything, including the drilling.
Wow. Yeah, it's good that you stuck to it,
Yes.
When it comes to, you know, your career and your intrigue in trying new things and looking at dimension stone differently, and obviously you do every other kind of technical blasting in your area. um what advice would you say you were given in general? And then part two to that question, what was the best advice your mother gave you? So the first
Yes.
part one is what advice, and then part two is advice that your mother gave you, and to go from there.
Well, I have always believed in being open-minded about new things, about new experiences, and even if you don't have the skills, just be open-minded, and at least think with movie producers. For example, I made some small contributions to the movie Tenet, which they had some blastings when they
That was
filmed in
you?
Estonia.
I saw that movie.
Yeah, when they filmed in Estonia, it was great. It was a great
You blew up
experience.
that plane?
No, it was when the bad guys came to the city hall of Estonia, and also when he was trying to take out the armor truck, and the roof of the armor truck was blown out. I used
Okay.
detonating cord there. I was very grateful for having the experience of using pipe charges with detonating cord, and then moving to special effects in movies. It was a great experience.
It's always
And
been a
I've
dream of
also,
mine.
yeah, it's a very different world, and it's very colorful world. I can recommend you taking part of this if you have a possibility. But also demolitions. I've done metal bridge demolition and smokestacks. And I've also consulted with military blasters who took down buildings. So I've helped them out with some of the know-how that I've managed to gather. And it has been always different blastings that I've been interested in. But those things come on your way when you're open-minded, and when you take things step by step. So if you have a new challenge, make some research, make sure that you have the know-how. If you don't, ask from someone or learn more about this, and everything can work out. It's not just being on the right place on the right time, but it's also about saying yes to things. Because even if you don't have all the tools at that specific moment, you can still be part of some great development. And that's when we come to part two. That's also what I learned from my mother. because some people might say that she was on the right place at the right time when she started with Swedish and making the company of blasting here in Estonia. But it's not just that. It's about saying yes to things. For example, she basically single-handedly took the road to go blasting in Lithuania, which is very, very hard by bureaucracy. And until she made it, there was only one company who made blasting in Lithuania, and that company belonged to the government of Lithuania, and it still does. And now she's the sole competitor of that company. And basically, she took the road, and she stayed there for 3 years until for the first blast. So just be open-minded and say yes to things, and then gradually, step by step, these things can happen, and they can be very, very good and positive.
Thank you very much. That's great advice. Yes, it's not just being in the right place, but being open to things and saying yes is a wonderful skill to have and a mindset to continue. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with here on our podcast before we end? Is there any parting advice or story that you might have that you've enjoyed or that you'd like to share?
Yes, well, I would like to send my greetings to all the mothers who have a shot fire as their daughter or a son. I know it's sometimes worrisome, but if they enjoy their work, then all you need to do is just give out support as my mother has done. And I'm very grateful for my mother for being there. And she's not just my boss and not just my mother, but she's also a very good friend. So I'm very grateful for being here, and she's just amazing.
Wonderful. Yeah, I gotta call my mom now.
Yes, you have to call your mom.
Absolutely. Well, happy Mother's Day to everybody listening, and thank your mom for all the support, and thank your mom specifically, Viive, who's had an impact on your life and the blasting in the area. And but everyone listening, call your mom if you can, or your wife, and or even your daughter if she's a mother, and wish them a happy Mother's Day. But thank you so much, Teele, for being here and for calling in and dealing with us and telling us your story. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
And hopefully EFI is in Estonia one of these years again, right? It's been there before, correct?
Yes, and I really hope we will have a conference very soon. Maybe 2027. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully I can get another excuse to come out that way. So thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blast Report podcast. I want to thank the team at Blast Think for producing this show, and please follow along for more episodes in the future, and share this podcast with your colleagues so we can continue to honor our industry and the people in it. Be safe and have a blast.